Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first tier list entering the 10th year of Marvel Future Fight's existence. That's right, it's MFF tier list 10.0.0. And oh baby, do we have a lot to get through. So let's just dive right into it. We've got a lot of updates to catch up on because we were sort of delaying to get more content, and now we have a smorgasbord of it. So we're going to start off with what feels like a long time ago, the Ebony Maw, Thane, and Echo mini updates that led up to the actual anniversary, where we then got the huge Sentry update. So Ebony Maw was the tier 4 there, with Echo following shortly after. Ebony didn't really meet expectations as a tier 4, despite being positioned for PvP, despite having an artifact for the Black Order. There's just not enough synergy between himself and Black Swan and basically nobody else, because the rest of the Black Order is pretty weak by today's standards. You know, Corvus has Revive, Black Dwarf has other abilities, you know, Corvus, whatever his name is, can't remember his name now, but they're just not good enough in the current meta. And basically he needed more tools. He needed another member of the Black Order to get a rework as well, or he needed to be stronger himself. Doesn't really have iframe ignore, doesn't really have any other way of staying alive naturally besides damage reduction. So yeah, Ebony kind of just flops around and has very limited value for things like Otherworld Battle, and basically no real value outside of those. Very fun to play, very easy to play, very nice animations, but that's not enough by today's standards. So he sort of falls into the category around somewhere like an Angel, but he's actually worse than that because he doesn't have the support ability that Angel has. So I think it's fair to put him squarely in somewhere like meta-ish. You could even argue that he doesn't really deserve to be better than Iron Man, but that's whether you value PvE or over PvP. I mean, he's not bad for PvE, and you could give him a proc or an energy CTP even, because he is very proc friendly. Very, like I said, very easy to play, kind of fun to play with the animations, but just doesn't really hold a candle to these heavier hitters, and certainly doesn't have, certainly needs a max build for PvP, and even then he's going to struggle to, really make things work for you in that arena. Similarly with Thane, very fun to play, very easy to play, proc friendly, but yeah, as a tier 3, he really isn't very relevant, even though they also tried to give him sort of a, Black Order type support PvP, not for the Black Order, but they tried to give him a PvP artifact, but it's really not enough. And Thane just exists, which is cool, but he exists in a realm where he deserves to be, I would say, at the bottom of meta-ish, or sorry, the bottom of borderline. And frankly, you could already put him in needs rework, because yeah, he's really not doing anything special or anything new. I mean, the characters that he's around are good characters still by today's standards, but they're not really being used unless they're in super niche situations. And then we get Echo. Echo was the lone tier 4, getting her own update. Didn't get anything else from the show. Didn't get like a Kingpin or a Daredevil or anything like that. Just Echo. And while she is okay, she suffers from the same issue that Ebony Maw suffers from, and a lot of other recent PvP geared tier 4s, is that they didn't go far enough to make her good enough for PvP. Now you can certainly see a pattern developing, if you wanted to, with recent tier 4s and the recent effort by the devs to release speed type PvP tier 4s with Angel, then Echo, and now most recently Quicksilver. And you could even argue to an extent, although she's not tier 4, she's native tier 3 Black Swan. Now sure, could you put a team like this together for something like Otherworld Battle? Maybe. But Echo's passives for speed types in Otherworld Battle, where you can't utilize her leadership, are limited. And although Quicksilver, Echo, and Angel all have the exact same artifact to mimic Spidey and Black Widow, they really don't do enough. And yeah, Echo basically has zero value in PvE. She's got a great leadership for PvP, don't get me wrong, it's fantastic for speed types, but there are no speed types who can hold a candle right now to the PvP meta of Sentry, Silver Surfer, Thanos, Adam, Jean, etc. There are no speed types who can stand up to that, and that's before you even discuss the fact that Wolverine just obliterates all speed types. So yeah, there's really not enough room for her, and like I said, no PvE value. So honestly, at this point, she's just a lead support, which is pretty sad to say, but it's honestly the truth. So we got to put her in the lead support category. That's where she belongs. And then we get the main update. This is the one that shook up the meta and will have the biggest ramifications for the game moving forward, perhaps throughout the year, depending on what other updates we get. But really, we had 2 sizable meta shifts. The first is Sentry for PvP. He is now the de facto #1 for PvP. It's pretty clear. I mean, it's a pretty heavy thing to say, but I think enough time has passed, and I have enough data to prove that basically if you're not running Sentry in your PvP team at some level, and you can run him without obviously like debuffs or whatever nerfs, because of the whatever the week's buffs are for the world battle or whatever timeline, then you're missing out, right? You're missing out. So yeah, very, very strong character for PvP, and no slouch for PvE either. No slouch for PvE either, which is impressive. I would dare to put him in Beyond Meta just to illustrate how strong he is in PvP, but I know some people will disagree with me because he has less value in PvE for sure than Jean. He certainly has less value in PvE than Jean Grey does, because Jean Grey dominates ABX ABL for the days that she's available, and if you have a rage on her, she can score higher than anyone else, right? Higher than even recent entries like Scarlet Witch. So she still dominates PvE, but she has fallen significantly, and notably she has fallen in PvE. So I do want to make this I want to get this point across. I don't really have a way of illustrating it with icons and this sort of thing, but yeah, Jean has lost a step, mainly because of Sentry in PvP and Silver Surfer and Thanos and this sort of thing. She's no longer the #1 for PvP. You can still make it work with her for PvP, but she's no longer the #1. I want to make that clear, but she's still amazing for PvE. So yeah, you could argue that maybe putting her down in meta dominating makes more sense, but we'll leave it here for now and see how things play out in the coming months with the next major game mode that they have announced. That, like, you know, special anyways, there's like a special game mode they announced. I don't want to get into it now, but yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. But Sentry, yeah, Sentry's now the big dog for PvP. This does seem more like a PvP geared tier list, but it's more difficult because PvP doesn't really give you a lot of counter play options. So when I say that Sentry's the best, and you're thinking, oh, who can I counter Sentry with? You kind of got to counter Sentry with another Sentry. That's kind of your best bet. So that's why PvP sort of is kind of like do or die. Whereas with PvE, I'm saying, you know, yeah, Sentry is Jean Grey is the best for ABX ABL, but you can certainly still get really respectable scores using Scarlet Witch, using you know, a Jean Grey with a PvP build, for example, using Captain Marvel, right? So there are other alternatives. There are other options that can still get you a good score depending on what it is you're trying to do. But simply just showing up and not getting flatlined for PvP, you're going to need to invest. So yeah. Then we had Thor. Thor was a surprisingly good buff that I didn't expect to see. He is probably a lot closer to Odin now than he was. But that being said, we do need to shuffle around some of these that have been sort of affected by the gravity of other characters like Scarlet Witch. So I'm not really sure where to put Thor right now. I would still probably put him just under Thanos. I think that's still a pretty respectable place to put him. But then again, Thanos may need to rise because of his PvP value and his sort of flexibility. Thanos is an interesting one because if you count how good Farmos is, how good Farmer Thanos is, then Thanos could honestly arguably be beyond meta because he's almost as good as Loki with a similar build for ABX ABL. And then if you switch to his PvP build, he's a beast, right? So it's kind of a tough one to rank, but we'll put Thor there for now. We'll get back to it later. But yeah, they just made Thor easier to play, and he's just better at what he does. Not better at anything new, but better at what he does. Ant-Man is a quick one. He's not very good. He was supposed to be good. He was supposed to be, you know, I mean, he's a very difficult character to farm, right? He was supposed to be in the realm of Blue Marvel, but they decided, nah, let's just not make him good. Let's make him, let's give him iframe ignore because the players keep crying about that. But let's make him super weak and defensively just like a feather. So he gets blown over constantly, gets interrupted constantly, and he can never do his 5th skill, which is his one sort of bread and butter move. Now, I would like to say that Ant-Man is fun to play in PvE because he has really nice animations, but he's not fun to play in PvE. He's really not. There's a lot of delay canceling. There's a lot of awkwardness. He's not proc friendly, even though he has an infinite skill where you can just press it and go. So yeah, I think they really missed the mark with Ant-Man. He has a really good leadership, though. He does have a really good leadership. So we'll put him in the leadership category. I know that sounds funny to you, and I just laughed myself, but yeah. Speaking of leaderships, Satana is here in the leadership category. I kind of want to, well, she deserves to at least be much higher. So let's start with that. She deserves to be like one of the best universal lead supports in the game. Obviously only for elemental types, but still very, very strong. But I almost think she deserves to be a little bit higher than that. But anyways, that's just my thought. And then we come to Hulk here. Hulk got a surprising upgrade, which switched him from being a irrelevant but pseudo-relevant PvP player to being very good for PvE. And not only very good, but super easy to play, fun to play, but more budget friendly, doesn't need as stacked of a build. So I kind of want to take the hammer away from Hulk so that people aren't confused. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. He also now has a leadership because he can buff his own HP by 30%, so it's awesome. But yeah, he's actually more for PvE now than PvP. But he's very, very good for PvE. So I kind of think with all of that value, he deserves to be here. Hit me up in the let me know in the comments. It's kind of tricky with Hulk because he still has some relevance in PvP. He gets completely destroyed by Reflect, but he can still go toe-to-toe at times with players like Thanos, characters that don't abuse too many iframes. But his real value and the real, you're like, oh man, this is great, is PvE, where he does some really, really awesome stuff, especially ABX, ABL. So I think he deserves to be here. But yeah, hit me up in the comments down below and let me know what you think. I honestly think that Hulk's existence just makes Dr. Octopus go down. I think, honestly, this makes more sense now, if you ask me, because Wolverine has actually gotten better with Sentry and Silver Surfer and stuff because he's still a reliable check to them. But yeah, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you guys think there. And then the most recent update we got is Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, the twins. Now, Scarlet Witch is very good. Some people are still disappointed given her cost for her for the value that you get, but it's undeniable that she is very good at tier 3 and at tier 4. And she has a very easy playstyle, unlike someone like Captain Marvel. So based on those factors alone, and based on the fact that her scores are as good or better, unless you have a maxed out team-up collection, I think she firmly deserves to be placed right here. She doesn't have the additional value of a Ghost Rider for PvP with like an immortality artifact, iframe ignore, etc. And then she doesn't dominate quite as hard as someone like Silver Surfer with revives and things like that. But I think this is a very fair place to put her in the meta, and I think she does well. But again, it's that sort of thing where if you want an alternative to Silver Surfer for PvP, there really isn't a good alternative to Silver Surfer for PvP. You sort of just need to build your own Silver Surfer. However, for PvE, if you want an alternative to Scarlet Witch, I already let the cat out of the bag, then you can just build Captain Marvel, right? And she's a native tier 1, so you can use the discount, and you're going to get a similar level of output, right? Is she going to be harder to play? Yeah. Is it going to be more tedious? Maybe. But, that aside, it's just easier to imitate or more closely resemble PvE outputs in this game than it is for PvP. And then Quicksilver was supposed to be, I guess, another notch in the ongoing under construction title belt of speed types for PvP. But he isn't. He isn't, unfortunately, for the same reason that Ebony Maw and Ant-Man and others aren't. He's just not strong enough defensively. The devs clearly forgot that speed types don't have enough base stats, and they didn't give him any damage reduction. They did let him keep his iframe ignore skill, but they didn't build enough on his PvP, foundation. They did give him a good artifact, but it's not enough. Basically, it's not enough. Like, characters have access to too much ignore dodge, so the dodge all artifact doesn't work as well as you think it ought to work unless you also have a lot of damage reduction, or like Spider-Man, who is somehow still hanging on by a thread, have a ton of increased damage to villains. Then it can work, and you can work as sort of like a one-shot sort of glass cannon. But again, he doesn't have those things. He doesn't have damage reduction. He doesn't have increased damage to villains or heroes for that matter. And so you're basically just resting on whatever your cards and your swords can do, allowing his fourth skill to one-shot. And if it doesn't one-shot, you're just praying to dodge your way through to another fourth skill. Otherwise, he gets his neck wrung and he's dead. He's I want to say he's fun to play in PvE. I think he can be fun to play in PvE, and he's not bad offensively, but there are better options. And unfortunately, speed male heroes don't have a huge place in today's meta, and that hasn't been fixed, and that may never be fixed or addressed. So yeah, it's kind of a tough call here where to put him. I think realistically, he deserves to be somewhere here. I don't think he's as good as Spider-Man given the cost. And yeah, it's kind of a shame. He really should be better. He really should be up here in meta dominating. I genuinely think he needs a buff. I think he needs like 30 to 40% damage reduction, and maybe a bump on his base stats. He really should be good because it's been years since he got a uniform. And when is he going to get another one? Realistically, he's not, right? So yeah, it's kind of a shame to see so many speed types recently be relegated to the lower echelons of the game. But yeah, that being said, I do feel like this tier list needs a shakeup because I don't know, something the tier list is not tier listing. There's something, you know, skibbity in Ohio, and I need to phone the Rizzler to find out how I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm saying, but it still represents how I feel about the tier list. Like, the tier list is not bad per se. I'm not like, oh man, I hate this tier list. I like the tier list, but I also feel like there's something missing, and I hate to say this, so I know some people are going to suggest it in the comments, but I refuse to divide the tier list between PV and PvP. I refuse to do that. I think it's a bad idea for the tier list. I think it's confusing, and I think it sort of ruins the spirit of the tier list. So I'm never going to, just as an aside here, like for people who want to talk about, like, this is like the meta tier list, because we're talking about how the tier list is designed. I'm never going to divide the tier list into PvP and PvE. I will never do that. But that being said, I do need to meditate on where we're at, because I feel like something is missing and something needs to change. Some method of organization of sort of the way that they're displayed or something needs to change. But I do welcome your feedback. So thank you so much for watching the video. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.